Board games have been a part of the Games Workshop catalog just about since the very beginning. But over the last decade or so, the rise of the cooperative miniatures-based board game industry has boomed largely through Kickstarter, and it's left Games Workshop in the dust. But can Warhammer Quest Darkwater close that gap? If it has any hopes of doing so, it's going to have to do it on the back of its miniatures. I am a huge fan of fantasy, cooperative, miniatures-based board games. In fact, I play them just about every Saturday night and have for the last 7 or so years. And while I've continually been impressed by those more complex and engaging games on the market, it makes me even less impressed by the shallow end of the pool that are the Games Workshop board games. I'm looking at you, Curse City. But the one thing we can't deny about the Games Workshop board games is true of every other game they make, and that's the quality of their miniatures. And that's what I want to focus on today, the miniatures, because I think the miniatures in the Darkwater box set are the coolest Games Workshop has ever made, specifically the bad guy ones. So whether you want to use them in this game, or you want to use them in a different Warhammer game you're playing, or you want to use them for Dungeons & Dragons, or even just like me, want to paint them because they're awesome models, you've got a lot of options to paint these things up and play with them. I do want to note that while I haven't played Darkwater yet, I do plan to, because there are some things I'm seeing in regards to this game that do excite me in that it's learned from other successful games on the market. First off, it does come with this nice heavy-duty hardcover book that folds out into all the battle maps for your game. And these look like strategic battle maps, as if they were play-tested, so the combat itself will be quite engaging and interesting. Next, they use all these boxes and secret packages that you open throughout the game. This is the kind of thing that really gets you interested and engaged in a board game. All the games that I've played that have these kinds of things really feel like they're tailored for a longer, engaging campaign. So yeah, it's all encouraging. I look forward to trying it out in my regular Saturday group. But before I play, I do need to get the models painted, and that's what we'll do today. But I'm not going to focus on the good guys. They are largely more boring in my eyes, but the monsters, the bad guys, are awesome. And I want to showcase a bunch of the different kinds of monsters in this box and how a painting style and painting color scheme can really pull them all together and knock them out fairly quickly. The diversity of nasty Nurgle in all its forms is really impressive here. I'm going to paint 3 of them today to show how this fun, nasty use of colorful underpainting can really work no matter what type of hero, villain, or monster you want to paint. I'm only using 10 paints to paint all my bad guy minis, and the key here is it's actually 2 groups of 5 paints. The first group are my bold, saturated, vibrant colors, and my second group of 5 are my moody, kind of nasty, grimdark colors. This first group will add drama with powerful use of color, largely used in our initial underpainting step of the paint job. That second group of colors will help define how I want these monsters to feel, and these colors are going to be used more in the base coats and highlighting step later, although we will touch on some of our saturated colors to really make those highlight colors pop throughout that process. Our first step is to slap a colorful coat of paint on each of our models. These tones will act as impactful shadows for the model, and they will catch the eye and add a depth that you just can't achieve by pushing every shadow towards black. This is called underpainting, and I've really enjoyed different experiments with this on the channel over the last couple of years. And this is my newest evolution, and we're going to try it out for the first time together today. I'm using a nice big synthetic brush, and I'm not worrying about being precise or painting in the lines. But as I paint each surface sloppily, I'm thinking about what color that surface will be at the end of the paint job, and what colors would look interesting underneath. For example, if I'm painting flesh, I want these undershadows to have magentas, reds, maybe a little blues in there so they go towards purple. This way we get that nice irritated blood warmth underneath the base coats and highlights we are going to paint on top later. I know surfaces like armor are going to be green later, but some rusty browns, saturated greens, and even bold blues will add variation in color interest if we start them here. The key here is there's not really a wrong decision on what colors to pick, and I'm not going to stress about making a wrong decision. Because I'm starting with that first group of 5 colors, the saturated bold ones, I know that impact will happen by using them, and that's really all all that matters. And as I'm swishing my paintbrush around, the colors are naturally mixing together. And that's great. It gives us some nice, interesting transitions of where these colors blend. And it looks like there's a lot more paints being used than actually are. I rarely even clean off my brush between colors. I just let them blend into a new color from that color on the brush. And if I make a mistake and place a color in the wrong area, most of the time I just let it be. Or if I want to change it, I can wait for it to dry and slap another color over the top later. Now, one trick I'm trying here is that if I know what a surface color is going to be at the end, for example, nurgling green skin, I don't start with an undercoat that is green. I want the colors to contrast and to show differentiation between the shadow and the final color. We'll see how that turns out, but I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb. The key here is to not overthink it. Use mostly colors from that first group of 5. And, if you want to use a bit of that Scrag brown or a different color in that undercoat step, by all means do so. If by the time you're done painting this first step, you feel like your model looks like an utter mess, congratulations. You probably did it right. Or you did screw it up terribly, and you could just blame it on me. Either way, you're good. All right, with the fast and wild step done, it's time to bring these guys to unlife. First up is Mulgoth what the hell is his name again? Mulgoth the Cleaver. Interesting lore tidbit. He's actually Papa Nurgle's official mashed potato stirrer.
Okay, now, dig in.
All right, we definitely got to make this big, beefy arm the star of the show here. So let's mix up some puddles of warm colors with a bit of blue and white to desaturate and brighten them up. We go right into that skin and paint every raised detail, defining the shapes and focusing on upturned areas. It's important that from the get-go, we make a noticeable jump up in brightness from our underpainting. This painting process can be quite quick because we're jumping right up into the impactful highlights. For this step, I like to think of using the paintbrush more like a pencil. I'm just drawing in lines, dots, little blobs wherever I touch the tip of the brush to the model. It's more like a comic book artist doing line work. You'll notice I'm not coloring everything in. I'm leaving some of that underneath color showing. Putting down a bunch of dots and lines makes the surface feel more natural, more imperfect, and it's much quicker than attempting to achieve smooth gradients and transitions. The more experience I get with this painting style of bold undertones and then straight to highlights on top, the more I realize the most important factor in this is controlling the paint consistency for this highlight step. And what I mean by that is how much we're thinning down our paint with water, because our paint is so bright compared to that vibrant underpainting. We want these highlight layers to be thinned enough that when they dry, they have enough transparency to meld with those darker, bold undertones. We can build up more brightness with more lines and dots in consecutive layers and use a brighter mix or an entirely different colored mix as we work around to different areas of the skin or other parts of the model that have a different colored undertone. And really, there's no wrong color choice here. It's why I put all 10 of my paints on my palette from the very beginning of the project. So I grab a little brush tip of this color, mix it in, whatever, it'll work. Because we're dealing with limited colors, they're gonna feel cohesive as those colors work their way around your entire model. For most of the models that I paint, I like to find one or two most important elements to that miniature, those things that really define that miniature and what make it look so cool, and focus my attention on painting those first. All the other details kind of fade into the background if you can get these parts done right. For Muldrotha here, or whatever the hell his name is, the second area of focus is obviously that Nurgle green armor. So we jump right in with lines and scratches, never worrying about smooth paint coverage. I like to push the yellow in the olive tone of Nurgle armor because it really accentuates that sickly vibe while adding an eye-catching pop of vibrancy and brightness. I just mix in a little Uriel yellow to my Deathworld forest, and as I go brighter and brighter with dot highlights, I add a bit of pure white. One thing that I really like about painting in this style, and you're probably noticing it while I'm painting this armor, is how little of the surface I actually end up painting in this highlight step. Like, if I were to paint all of the armor this bright green, it would not only take forever, but it actually pulls away all of the drama that we're creating. I focus just on upward facing surfaces and just the side of the armor that the light direction is coming from. Understanding light direction is a bit of a complex topic, but this is a great way to practice that and to really get yourself to understand, if I'm going to be painting this surface, where would the light hit it, and make sure it's consistent across all surfaces of the model. Again, do not overpaint. Do not paint too much of your highlights. Let that funky rust and bluish green undertone still show, and you'll be well on your way. Today's video is brought to us by Into the AM, and this is perfect timing because their biggest sale of the year, their Black Friday / Cyber Monday sale, is going on right now. But unfortunately, it's not going on for much longer. It ends on December 7th, which, according to my watch, is in just a few days. And listen, I get it. This is the time of year where everyone has a massive sale. But this isn't about buying something because it's on sale. It's about buying extremely high quality, stylish, and comfortable clothing that I'm happy to pay full price for. It just so happens that because of the massive sale, I get to stretch my dollar a little further. I love Into the AM because it helped refine my style while still keeping it true to the kinds of things that I enjoy wearing. Now they just look cooler, last a lot longer, and are way more comfortable. So please, check out the massive 60% off sale link below. I guarantee you are going to find something that you love, as well as for a gift for somebody else on your holiday shopping list. And of course, you can use code NINJON at checkout to get an additional 10% off your entire order. And yes, that stacks with the massive sale going on right now. A big thank you to Into the AM for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to it. All right, we got our first one done in this more detailed underpainting style. And I gotta say, I'm pumped. This was way more fun than I had expected it to be, but we still have a couple more models to paint and some unanswered questions, like how does this paint style with these colors work on monsters? And with these bold colors, can we make all of these monsters feel like they're part of the same cohesive army, unit, or faction, whatever system of organization you want to put them in? The only way to find the answers to those questions is to keep painting, and our next test is on a Pestigore, the wonderful booger beast man in the box. Now, these guys have some new challenges to tackle, largely the fact that their flesh is not the same as human skin, but still largely needs to read in a similar manner that it's alive, and the large amount of details on these dudes kind of can take over all of the important parts, so we're gonna have to try to tackle that. Now, we don't want to get stuck in the weeds on those bullshit details, so let's start on the important stuff first, that being his beast hide. For this, I mix in just a bit of a rusty colored scrag brown to whatever pinkish, reddish, magenta, whatever flesh mix I was using from the last model. This gives us a bit of a terracotta color, so it's still warm, it still feels like it's got a bit of life to it, but it's less pink than a human or elf skin. I build up the paint more on the upward-facing surfaces and shapes that make up his flesh. Things like his upward-facing top of belly and, of course, his goat nipples. I'm going to try something a little new on this one that I didn't try on the last model, and that is glazing in some sickly green and pure red around the sores and boils on his skin. I didn't test this out in the last model, but this is really quick, and it really makes these areas pop with even an extra layer of depth of color that brings out the nastiness. And what that exact test has taught me is that the underpainting colors aren't sacrosanct. We do not have to keep all of them untouched. So if we want to push in some more interesting colors in the shadows or change things around to bring that nasty boils and buboes to life, we can do that, and it's not going to screw up the work we already did. And the reason why we're not going to screw it up is the secret that we're actually exploiting here. Acrylic miniature paint is naturally translucent. By starting with bold colors and building up with fast translucent layers on top, we're building so much more depth and interest in a short period of time. So I don't have to worry about what color I paint any specific detail on the model or what additional color I want to add to those details. Instead, I get the benefit of being able to lean on that weird color that I placed underneath. That way, it looks like it was all planned out from the beginning, and the colors do most of that heavy lifting for us. Hot take, most details that are on models these days aren't important, and that doesn't mean I don't think they should be there. I just think they don't need to be the focus of any of our painting. Random belts, pouches, pieces of fabric, your scattered skulls everywhere. You get the idea. One thing I do like to do is mix a bit of blue-green and slap that into the dark regions of the metallic details that I want to read as copper later. I just pair that with a bright rusty orange highlight on a bit of the upward raising surfaces, and wham, I've got an easy copper no matter what color it started with the undercoat. One thing I'm doing to try to make sure this guy ties into our original model is to paint his shoulder armor in the same way that we painted that guy. So that way they'll feel like they're part of the same faction. But I do really want to tell you that you shouldn't stress about getting an exact color match on anything, even these two sections of armor that you want to look like they're the same. As long as my base tone, that Death World Forest, is the same, it doesn't matter how much little bit of yellow or a little bit of blue or a little bit of white that I add to it. It is going to feel like it's the same color. To paint the iron or steel, I just use a Mechanicus standard gray, mix that 50-50 with water, just like I'm doing with every other highlight coat here, and I start building up tiny little scratches all over the blade. Again, be careful that you don't cover all of that underneath stuff. You still want that to show through. And as I add more layers of these scratches, I mix in a bit of white, and then I focus more on the pits and imperfections in the metal with a few edge highlights and rivets dotted so those shine the brightest. All right, at this point in the paint job, my wet palette looks like a hot mess of sporadic colors mixed all over the place and mostly dried puddles of paint. For the most part, I can't even identify my 10 pure colors up at the top. And if this stresses you out, like it does me sometimes, I want you to take a deep breath. This is a visual reminder of color being a tool, and it is not a restriction. We are just using the colors however we feel. And as long as we have some level of guidelines of how I do the undercoat and then how I do the highlight step, the colors themselves will work themselves out, and you'll learn as you go. So do not feel so tied down about specific color decisions. All right, second one down, and this goat man was as fun or more fun than the first guy. I am pumped to move on to our third and final model, and I've saved the best for last. This is a big, scary, Nurgle man child triplet. What's he called? Cankerborn. Does that mean he's a herpes demon or? Anyway, these guys are like a big, scary plague bearer, and I want to keep that traditional green skin here while having a bit of fun with it and seeing how this works with our anything but green underpainting. I decided to paint his three little conjoined heads inspired by cold sores, so that's your fault, Games Workshop. You named it that, not me. I do want the heads to be brighter and less green so our eye is drawn to them a little bit more naturally, and I just follow the wrinkles with a pinkish and green highlight, and I keep the lower jaws more blue. When moving on to the rest of the skin, I started by painting the large and most visible sections with that same Death World Forest color that I used for the armor on the previous models. I felt like it was going to get boring if I just painted this entire dude green because he's so big and lanky. So I decided to add a little bit of blue to that olive tone in areas that had a purple or blue undertone that I had painted earlier. These areas tended to be like up in his armpits or on the underside of his knees or even his hands. This gave us some natural variation to color while still feeling like it's the same monster. The actual painting process is just painting a lot of lines and dots like we were doing before. And where this new color meets the original olive color, I just painted some lines that overlap the other section so they would meld together surprisingly easily. I really feel like this more varied form of that underpainting step is encouraging me to use a variety of colors and transitions on the model itself. But the cool thing is, even if I just paint all this model's skin green, he would look much more varied because of the varied tones from that underpainting we initially put down. Also, this model has the cutest little bug butt you ever did see, so I wanted to make sure we drew attention to that. We made that much more brighter and almost like a weird human skin color bug butt. You're welcome. All right, this dude also has a lot of weird details that we don't want to draw all that much attention to, like the strands of seaweed he's got growing random spots and the rock growing out of his belly. He's got moss, he's got horns, he's got skulls, the huge. For these details, I just mix any colors that are already on my palette until they start looking like some form of baby poop, and then I just paint whatever detail with that. One thing I did test on this third model was going with a really vibrant undertone, specifically on his mossy back. That's much brighter than I typically put these shadow tones under. I actually wasn't sure how to approach this here, so I ended up going with a darker color on top and just kind of dotting the textures on top of the moss so it looks brighter underneath, and the more crusty, environmentally exposed stuff is darker on top. To push this inner vibrancy a little more, I ran a line of pure yellow down the deepest cracks to push that vibrancy up. I painted his sword just the same way that I did our goat boys, starting with a mid-tone gray and working with scratches getting brighter and brighter. Now, on this sword, he's got this weird Stranger Things looking thing growing on the sword, so I painted that like flesh because obviously that's Stranger Things flesh upside down stuff. And then I painted the 3 little dots kind of like eyeballs, but maybe they're not eyeballs. I don't really know what they are. Maybe they're billiard balls. And with our bug butt boy complete, now all 3 are done. And I gotta say, I think they actually look pretty good together. They kind of feel like they came from the same nightmare-fueled broken home, but I think that's a good thing. You know, this new experimentation in underpainting was probably the most fun I've had in painting in a long time, maybe years. I mean, don't get me wrong, I always love mini painting, but something about this really struck different. Of course, the models helped a lot. These are amazing models. I love just about every single model in the Darkwater box. They are right up my alley and gorgeously sculpted. And of course, I've really enjoyed underpainting as a way to speed up the painting process while adding drama through color. But something about this time, the pushing the underpainting with a bit of purpose, with some more randomness, with some direction that I can use later on, and it helps me stay excited and seeing a model to finish. It just felt a little bit more, for lack of a better term, like art. I really hope you try it. It's the reason why I make videos like these, because I'm so excited about it and I want you to experience it as well. It doesn't take all that long. It doesn't take very many paints. And as long as you kind of take your time, the first couple of models you paint, you'll get the hang of it and you'll be pretty efficient with it. I want to end with this, and I can't say it enough. Thank you. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any. Thank you if you've picked up a Ninjon shirt over the years, or you've joined me on the Patreon and hang out on Discord, or if you've backed the upcoming deck of many colors. I really, really appreciate your support. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got to get back to painting and then do a podcast about miniature painting later called Trapped Under Plastic. If you don't listen to us, you need to. I'm going to be back again next week with another new video. Just make sure that sometime between now and then, you find time in your day to slay the gray. It's just there to show smooth color transitions. Nah, fuck that.
All right, now it's time for the turkey. Oh, what a beautiful...
No, hey, hey, hey.